Welcome everybody to today's webinar. MCNC and Crowdstrike are both really excited to share with the North Carolina public education community this really exciting opportunity for a managed endpoint protection service. Let's do some introductions. I'm Ruthy Mabe, Manager of Security Services Business here at MCNC. Joining me today are Stephen Walton from MCNC and Crowdstrike's David Bill. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. I'm Stephen Walton, cybersecurity engineer who led up the evaluations and helped us land on Crowdstrike.
And David?
Awesome. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is David Bill, sales engineer with Crowdstrike, partnering here with MCNC on their security rollout.
Great, thank you. So, quick review of today's agenda. We'll be providing you a full overview of the service offering being made available by NCDPI and MCNC and Crowdstrike. We'll go over the what it is, what it isn't. We'll do a deep dive into each component of the service and explain how we manage the service for the PSUs. We're not going to be doing a live demo today. However, we will show you some screenshots from the portal. We will also be providing a pre-recorded demo on the landing page in the near future. From there, we'll go into the really exciting stuff that people are really interested in, how to enroll for this service and the onboarding question, the onboarding schedule. And again, at the end, we will be doing a Q&A. So if you have questions along the way, please add them into the question box there and we will get to them at the end. So let's get started. NCDPI announced last week that it has procured our managed endpoint protection solution for all of the North Carolina public school units. Very exciting news, and all of you guys have clearly heard the word because you're here with us today to learn more about that offering. Our managed endpoint protection solution is designed to protect against all types of cyber threats, targeting the endpoint devices, including especially against ransomware. No solution, you'll never hear MCNC say that there's one solution that will provide 100% protection, but we do believe that the combination of Crowdstrike's best-in-class solution, MCNC's real-time monitoring and response, and the visibility around hygiene that both MCNC and you as the user will have all combined to provide a substantial protection against that threat of ransomware. This is why we've prioritized making this service available to the community. We are very pleased to have been able to partner with Crowdstrike for this solution. Crowdstrike is a global leader in the cybersecurity space, and their endpoint protection solution is a clear leader. The good news is, right there and underlined, is that this service is available to the PSUs at no cost. As most people will be very interested in hearing, the initial term is 24 months, starting on May 1st. So early adoption and enrollment is key to get the most out of this service for you. Per DPI, the first year of this service was funded by the emergency relief funding, but the second year was funded by school connectivity funding expansion. If the rollout of this service is successful, including early adoption and high enrollment, there's a very high likelihood of continued funding after that initial 2 years. We absolutely can have a conversation with you around pricing if you are interested in what it may be after that first 2 years. Again, we have no promises beyond that initial term, but we are optimistic for additional funding. So that being said, what's included? The service includes licenses for the PSU's managed servers, staff devices, and other PSU managed non-student devices. All right, so that includes your teacher devices. It also includes your student lab devices that are managed by the PSU. It does not include your individual student devices. If you are interested in purchasing additional licenses, you can reach out to MCNC and we can have a conversation around licensing for students. That's a custom scope conversation. And our contact information is going to be provided at the end of the slide here. Eligible device types are Windows, Macs, Linux, currently supported operating system. Okay. So with that being said, Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Ruthy. So there's going to be a couple of terms you'll hear us mention repeatedly as we go through this, and one's called, more of a prevention, the advanced security protection component of this. And, here's where, some of the value of this comes in. So it's a managed service. And what that means is as the agent's blocking stuff, as it's reporting detections into the cloud, you have MCNC there. We're going to be looking at all of those. That's all going to be based off of the agent. It's going to have next-gen AV detection and response. It's going to be superior to legacy signature-based solutions that have to cause CPU bloat as they hash every single file, as they compare it to some big 500 megabyte, gigabyte size offline hash database. And as those detections that CrowdStrike sees are put into the console, you have MCNC looking at them, triaging them, deciding if it's even worth, passing on to you or not. So if you think of false positives or all of the burden that can come with having just another blinking light, that's where MCNC steps in and we take that off of your plate. The thing where we say we'll contact you only when needed is because we're still looking at those, we're triaging them, we're using our visibility across all of our PSUs through tools within the CrowdStrike console, labbing, our understanding uniquely being positioned in this education space within North Carolina to understand what's a false positive, what is actually malicious, and then we'll contact you when needed. And we're not just going to throw it over the fence and walk away. We're going to summarize that detection. We're going to do our best to give you next steps. We're going to give vulnerability reports about the device, the user who logged in, timestamps. If it's a user impacting multiple devices, you'll get all of that summarized as well, along with the mixture of, recommended next steps, if there are any. Some things may be technical, some things may be administrative. That's really the prevent component of this, but it's also built upon the insight. So as these detections are occurring, as the device is running the CrowdStrike agent, it's going to be collecting a vast amount of information about what exactly happened. So it's not just a point detection of a bad file was executed. You have a full process to where we can determine if that executed from within Chrome or from within File Explorer, if it was something like a cross-site scripting that came through a web portal. The other key component is with all of this MCNC, we're going to be looking at this 24/7. Critical detections are going to be the worst of the worst that'll occur in there. So we call out that we'll need an off hours contact for response of this. That's because most things we can triage, we'll handle for you. Some things are more time sensitive though, and that's where that off hours contact for those critical detections comes in. And again, we're not just throwing something over the fence, going back to sleep. 2 a.m., we'll call you, we'll jump on the phone with you, we'll get working. And I already touched on the summary component there. So up next, we'll have a screenshot of what one of the dashboards looks like. So we talk about the solution as being fully managed. That doesn't mean that you don't have access to this. We're hiding nothing from you. Some services give you access and walk away, it's all on you. Some services do everything and they don't give you visibility. We're positioning this, in that middle there where you'll have read-only access to see everything going on. One of the concerns when we say that we'll address all of those blinking lights and we're not necessarily going to contact you if it doesn't need your immediate attention, how do you know what is happening? CrowdStrike has robust reporting dashboards. What we have here is just a quick sample dashboard that I created that we walk through our onboarding phase. We cover all of this, which we'll touch on in a moment, but just a sample dashboard that you could have emailed out on a weekly basis so you don't have to go hunting for it. You can send it to leadership. You can review it yourself to plan your next week, month, quarter. And some of the visibility you have is not only what type of malware was it, what platforms did it impact? Is it your Linux, Windows, Mac devices that are the top targets? Is it your workstations, your servers, as well as a number of detections for your environment? So lows, mediums, highs, no criticals in this screenshot, which is good. And again, some numerical breakdown. The other thing to mention is a lot of this can be manipulated into either bar graphs, as you see detection by host type in the upper right, or we can break it down by numbers. So very flexible, very powerful. In the next section here, we'll touch on some of the hygiene components. So hygiene is part of why we chose Crowdstrike. Everything I'm about to mention is just one sensor agent that automatically updates, 1% CPU usage, 50 to 100 megabytes of RAM. It's a 50 megabyte sensor you install, extremely lightweight, good for environments that have either older hardware or hardware that's already been over provisioned, that's been stressed. Crowdstrike's going to be the solution. There is no 500 megabyte offline hash file that you have to tote around, constantly update, eats up bandwidth. The hygiene is split into two components. The first one's going to be discover, which is really just visibility. What do you know about your environments? Do you know what's on your network? Crowdstrike's going to show you by looking at the ARP table, reporting that for you. Do you know fully what your environment looks like? Your staff, your faculty, machines, what OS version are they running? All of that information can again be put out into dashboards, which we'll show in a moment. And the whole entire focus of Discover is the agent's there, it's collecting that information at no additional CPU burden. So let's expose it to you. MCNC references this when we're looking through detections. If we see a device not running CrowdStrike is performing an attack, we can look at unmanaged devices. We can, try and gauge if you have accounts with long-running passwords. We'll be able to see that visibility with Discover, as well as your application inventory, your device utilization. We can look at charts of that. So if there is a scenario where you think a device is running slow suddenly, we can get CPU graphs, memory graphs. We can even see changes in hardware on a device, such as if a drive were removed or were cut down, potentially bad actors on there, carving off space for persistence. Spotlight is the other component of hygiene here. So Discover is giving you awareness about what's in your environment. Spotlight's going to tell you where can you improve in that environment. It's vulnerability management. The agent's there. I keep saying it. No CPU bloat. It's not another tool to manage. It's all automatically collected, parsed, presented to you. Expert rating is there because CVSS scores are given out in a vacuum and people rarely take the time to analyze those severities and process them for their environment. CrowdStrike being the threat intel company they analyze that. They understand if it's a common target, if it's, easy to exploit, what's the blast radius if it's exploited. All of that goes into their expert rating, where you may have a high in a vacuum, but nobody's exploiting it. It's not a popular target. So then that's not a priority for you, according to them. Expert will say it's a low, where you may have a low that's readily exploited. It has a GitHub link to it. It's something a student can trivially, exploit and impact class instruction. That's, of course, going to be a critical. Further, you're going to install this and you're going to see a lot of big numbers. The vulnerability numbers are there to start gauging where you need to focus yourself. However, remediations are key. CrowdStrike isn't satisfied with just giving you X number of vulnerabilities on Windows, on Python, on those common applications you're going to see. They're going to give you remediations that are going to summarize what steps do you need to take to get that machine in a better position. So you could have 1,000 vulnerabilities that are summed up by updating Windows, applying a security KB, and making sure Chrome's been updated. Just tell the user to hit update, give it a second to relaunch. Further, all of this is going to be easily sortable by device, product, vulnerability. We'll walk you through how to manage and work through all of that stuff so that you can sort by device, prioritize your domain controllers, your servers, sort by product. If you have a lot of Office 2013 in your environment, you'll now be armed with the exact vulnerabilities, the device is vulnerable, to make a case for funding to replace that. Or you can look at exact vulnerability. When you hear about a new CVE, Crowdstrike will update. You'll be able to search for those specific CVEs in your environment. Next up are some dashboards, because again, all of this information is handy to dig through, but how do we take this out into something we can email to ourselves on a scheduled basis? How do we summarize it? How do we think of sending it off to executives or putting it into presentations when we request that funding? This here is, again, just another custom dashboard I threw together quickly. I mentioned with Discover, so that first hygiene component, we can start to look at account health. Do you have a password policy? If so, is it being followed? Do you have local accounts that are circumventing your policy? This will track those accounts that log in. We can see how old the passwords are, and all of this will be interactive. You can see the 144 is a different color than the 90. I've moused over that. I could click into that and see my domain accounts, how old their password is, where they've successfully logged into, where they failed to log into, what timestamp that happened, how old their password is, export that into reports. So one of the common threats to environments is a domain administrator password that hasn't been changed in years. You don't know where it's being logged into. You don't know who's using it. This will help give visibility. And again, I keep saying, we can split this up into different graphs, bar graphs on the left, or we can look at our domain and local accounts on a circle graph on the right. Plenty of ways to manipulate the data in a way that makes sense to you. These are just examples. It's pretty bottomless what you can do with this. Next up, we're going to have a spotlight dashboard. So again, I mentioned those vulnerabilities that exist. This is just, again, a sample dashboard. We can see on the left the number of expert ratings we have. So about half of those are low, according to CrowdStrike's expert rating. Mediums, criticals, highs. Vulnerability by product. This is where I say you can look and see that in this graph, Chrome is taking up a large chunk of it. Windows Server 2016 is taking up a large chunk of it. If I've got limited time, I need to make sure that users are educated to update Chrome when it prompts them to. I need to look at my Server 2016 environment, prioritize fixing that. You can even start to see other things like Java are on there, some Server 2012 R2, just gives you an idea of where to spend your time. OS versions by host. Again, this just lets us see, how many of these vulnerabilities are applied to which host. Which host is the big talker. So this is stepping away from which ones may be critical or not, letting me know that Windows 10, that's going to be workstations, is going to have a larger portion of these vulnerabilities than anything else. How we make sense of this is going to be specific to your environment, and we're here to walk you through it during the onboarding process, which I get to in a moment. Recommended remediations. This is some of where I say we're not content to just send you vulnerabilities. That top vulnerability is about 2,800 instances where Server 2016 needs to be patched with that KB. Patch that KB on 10 hosts, you're going to fix 2,800 vulnerabilities. So think about that. You're not worrying about 2,800 vulnerabilities as a big number. You just have to go to those servers, make sure they have proper patching on them. You'll be closing up those vulnerabilities. Similar thing with Chrome. 15 hosts are responsible for over 2,800 vulnerabilities. You can click into that. You can find those 15 hosts. Maybe those are users that you send broad user training to, or maybe you'll send them more specific user training. Visibility is granted to you. We can advise, and we've got security services for, those type of programs. Even bar graphs, if you want to send something to leadership of here's how our vulnerabilities are ebbing and flowing, keep an eye on this. If new vulnerabilities are released, you'll see a spike on this. Ideally, you patch them. You get to see the closed spike soon after. And that'll be it for the dashboard slide. So a lot of stuff here. The key foundation here is the protection is, going to be the bread and butter of this. That's the core component of why we're looking at a managed endpoint protection. As Ruthy said, we feel this is the first best step we can take to preventing ransomware, helping North Carolina be a more secure state. And we do that by partnering with CrowdStrike. What that means is that MCNC, we're here for you every step of the way. we're keeping our eyes on the console. We're going to be in there 24/7, middle of the night. We see a critical alert, we're going to contact you. We're also partnering with Crowdstrike Overwatch. So they're going to back us up, again, every step of the way. That's their threat hunting team. So CrowdStrike's dedicated threat hunting team, they're going to be looking in the console. When you ask about what about a new 0-day, Overwatch is going to be there. The agent's already programmed, designed to look for anomalous behavior. If anything does manage to get through that, Overwatch is already there looking for what will be those key indicators of attack. What is that anomalous behavior looking like? And they've got visibility across the entire customer base. So that's the big partnership there. Ultimately, you're going to have a 24/7, 365 managed security tool where we're looking at it. We're letting you know when you need to take action. We're triaging what we can. You're backed by dedicated threat hunters. You can set up your custom alerting dashboards as you wish, wait for us to, alert you when needed. And you've got access to all of the visibility that we leverage because we're not hiding anything from you. Of course, the best guard dog in the world is not good if you don't work through all the vulnerabilities and other, gaps in the network that now you'll have visibility to. So we talked about a couple of things here. So obviously we have two types of SLAs to keep in mind. If we look at our security alerts, so I just mentioned how MCNC, we're looking at that console, you've got 24/7 eyes on it. Something happens, we'll look at it, we'll triage it. The security alerts on the right, that's that critical. That's where we will call you. These criticals are very rare, but it's still very important that as you sign up for this service, that you keep in mind who is the person with authority to take that call in the middle of the night if it were to come in. These are, far worse than just a basic fiber cut. These are, assume you have an intruder in your environment. SLA is going to be like a service level agreement. These are the time commitments that we have. If a critical comes in, we commit to 24/7, 365. We're going to have it triaged. We're going to contact you. You don't have to worry about waking up in the middle of the night and something occurred at 10 p.m. and, oh no, they've been in my environment for 10, 12 hours wreaking havoc. Of course, high, medium, low. The key thing here is that when we're talking service level agreements and these timers, these aren't our minimums, these are our maximums. We're going to be fully staffed. We're going to be hitting these as soon as they come in, as rapidly as we can. On the left side, we have service support requests. So as we go through onboarding, you have read-only access to look at the detections, the policy, that core component of making sure that the environment's properly secured, that you're running CrowdStrike's best practices, that you don't have weak exclusions that may open you up to attack. That doesn't mean that you don't have a part to play in here. All of those dashboards are going to be customizable by you, the end user. You can create them, tweak them, set up your scheduled reporting, manipulate them how you want. Service support requests are sort of the all of the above. So if the console goes down, you can't get access to it, that's where that goes. If you have files or software that just aren't quite working right, send that to us, let us know. Criticals and highs are reserved for your principal is knocked down. He can't present. Why can't he load PowerPoint? Call us, we'll work through it, we'll get you taken care of. If your whole entire school is down, obviously that's pretty bad. That shouldn't happen. Contact us. That's your critical. That's your highs. We ask you to self-report those, but when something critical or high does come in, we will need a site person on hand. Join us on the call. That way we can work through that and get you timely resolution. Your mediums and lows are for more of your general, how do I do this dashboard? How do I get this report going? More basic, Q&As where, we can hopefully get you pull up, whatever we need to get that resolved. So that's sort of covers the support security there. Just know that there's two. Security alerts are detections in the consoles where we contact you. Service support is more administrative. Something's not working quite right and you think it should work in a way, let us know. Thank you, Ruthy.
Thanks, Stephen. One thing I'll add around the security alert response, the sensor itself is taking action, right? It is doing those blocks. It's doing the steps that are required when it identifies that activity. So this is not around the, the SLA there is not around how long it takes the sensor to do the work. That is when MCNC is engaging, responding to, providing additional context and reaching out to you if needed around the activity that is detected by the sensor. So with that being said, now it's time for the fun stuff around how to enroll for this service if you're interested. So we need some information from each of you if you are interested in signing up for this service. We've created a questionnaire that includes contact information, estimated number of endpoints, a little bit about your environment, also your timeline, if you're as soon as possible type request, or if you have additional availability later in the summer and the fall timeframe to do an onboarding. So we ask that you go in and you fill out this questionnaire. I will be sending this slide to everyone who is attending today, so you have that information from me today. We also have a sign up link on the MCNC landing page that we have created for this project. Today it has the information that's being covered in today's webinar that is going to grow as a resource. We're going to add additional information, training videos, details around upcoming onboardings, that type of thing. So once we get the questionnaire back from you, then we will do a review of your responses, see if we need any additional clarification. Then we will work to get you a signed statement of work. So we will send to you that SOW that has all of the details around the service, the description, what's included, what's not, also details those SLA requirements that Stephen had just reviewed with everyone. Once we receive your statement of work back, signed, fully executed, that's when we will assign you to an upcoming onboarding wave. And so you say, all right, what is an onboarding wave? So let's go to the next step here to talk about what onboarding looks like. So we are going to group PSUs into waves that have, and these are the PSUs again that have gone through the steps from the previous slide. They filled out our questionnaire, they've signed the statement of work. We will group you together based on need and availability to go through a 6-week onboarding schedule. Each of these these waves have multiple phases. Each phase is going to have specific objectives that we will lay out for you in the process. I'll have Stephen just a second go through all of those waves. But each wave or each phase will have a mandatory onboarding call where we'll go through that objective, and we're going to provide you office hours. So MCNC, the onboarding team is going to make ourselves available to you to help you walk through those steps. All right, so when are the upcoming waves being scheduled? So we have scheduled the first wave, which currently has limited availability for this launch, to start on May 23rd. So that is less than a month. We understand that a lot of people may be very interested in getting in on that initial wave. And so what we ask is if you respond to the questionnaire that you are interested in participating in wave 1, that you give us a little bit of extra context as to why you should be included in that wave. Otherwise, we will schedule you to be in wave 2 at the earliest. That wave is a 6-week course, again, starting after the holiday of July 4th week. We're targeting 50 PSUs to be grouped in that summer wave. The third wave, we are targeting early fall after likely the Labor Day weekend, but that's a TBD, and obviously registration is still open for that. Once we get through that third wave, we will look at availability for PSUs that have expressed interest but have not said when they're ready to onboard this service, and that will be in subsequent waves after wave 3 completes. All right, so Stephen, can you walk us through the phases in the onboarding waves?
Certainly. So the key thing to keep in mind with all this is obviously time commitment. So I preface this by saying each phase is going to have a mandatory 2-hour call roughly where we're covering what that phase entails. We're we believe that, being interactive is, the key to success here. So you're going to have screen shares every step of the way so that we can walk you through all of those components. We're not going to, do death by PowerPoint. We're not just going to talk on a, screen the whole entire time. So make sure that you plan that time to sit there, pay attention, learn about what we're conveying. And, that also means the deployment component of this. So when we look at time commitment, you also have to understand how comfortable are you deploying solutions in your environment, because that's where the 50%, 100% targets come from, as well as being able to uninstall your existing AV. So as you're looking forward to your wave, just keep those in mind. I can't give you an exact hour commitment because you know your environment and your capabilities better than anybody else to know how easily you can install to mass devices and uninstall. Starting with phase one, though, this is your basic initial access. So we'll have a meeting. We'll make sure everybody can get into the console. You're going to have a two-factor authentication device like a Google Authenticator or an Authy when you create your account. And, really, we're just going to work on downloading and installing the sensor. This is very much a crawl phase where we ask you to join with sample machines, VMs, loaner device. Even if it's your own managed device that you yourself use, that'll still be perfectly fine because we're going to install in a detect only fashion. We call it the onboarding policy, simply because we're just trying to get you comfortable installing the agent. It's not going to conflict with other devices, with other EDR products, AV solutions. So just make sure that you're comfortable using your SCCM, your Intune, your MDM, however you're going to deploy the tool. This is the phase where we focus on that. And as Ruthy said, this will happen that same week. Friday, we'll have office hours. Same time next week, we'll have office hours. Next week, Friday, we'll have office hours so that you have plenty of availability to join us as well. Those will be live sessions. We can all pull together, troubleshoot, work through whatever challenges you may have. Hopefully, if we get enough attendance there, we can all collaboratively work together to do this very rapidly, which is the other thing. We understand that this is a very rapid rollout, but that goes back to some of, rapidly getting this stood up across the state so that we can prove the value of it and show that this really is something meaningful that'll help us. Phase two is where we kick things up a bit. We're going to be moving you into a training policy. The training policy is interesting because here's where we ask you to uninstall your existing AV solution. Crowdstrike's going to be blocking now. It's not going to have all of the toggles turned on. We're not going to be at max sensitivity for blocking, but we will be at max sensitivity for visibility. We'll also be able to dig into Spotlight and Discover, which is where that 50% target comes into. Those two components of the hygiene are really populated by your devices running the agent. So the more devices you've installed to, when I'm walking through my test demo portal, you'll be able to walk through your portal and it'll be as valuable as you have number of devices installed in there. This is also where we try to focus on getting the sensor rolled out to all of your devices. If you get rolled out to 100% of your devices week one of phase one, excellent. However, by the end of phase two, we really hope that that second week of phase two, you've got 100% deployment of CrowdStrike and you've been able to work on removing your existing AV. Phase three is the week where we start to wrap things up. By this time, you should have your AV fully uninstalled. We'll be reviewing general processes during our calls, reviewing SLAs again. We're still going to jump into Discover, Spotlight, touch on those dashboards, scheduled reports, all of the value that you as a PSU can extract out of there, all of that visibility. We'll talk about use cases. And because you have 100% of your devices in there, that's where we can start doing some really targeted, examples of here's something in your environment that may be worth looking at. At the end on phase four is where we just do additional wrap up. That is more of a buffer week that is built in there for any lingering questions, concerns, or, just to generally have availability to look at dashboards or anything that wave deems necessary. And of course, the office hours are there each wave that Friday morning. And then on the following Tuesday of phase 1 and 2, we'll have office hours. So we ask you to join at least that first meeting, but we'll also be open for an additional 2-hour meeting. So we'll be open for an additional, phase 1 will have 6 hours, phase 2 will have 6 hours of availability. Phase 3 and 4 will just have that Friday 2 hours of availability roughly. Of course, our security operations teams here, we'll be here for you every step of the way. We're not only reachable during those times. That's just the dedicated times where we'll be on a Zoom session waiting for somebody to come by. And I think the other thing to mention on here is when we're looking through these phased approach, we do so because we're trying to minimize end user disruption. So as we move through these phases, that's where we'll catch those, common detections. If you commonly use VBA macros, then that training policy is where we'll start to see those, especially once you've uninstalled your AV. As you try to tune the policy to ensure that moving forward, you don't have false positives, end user disruptions, any problems like that, those will get hashed out as we increment through this policy, which also mirrors CrowdStrike's best practices for onboarding. So we're not really treading new ground from that perspective. We're, following by what CrowdStrike has proven and worked through as a proper way to onboard like this.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think that's really key to highlight that it is a 6-week onboarding schedule, which can be daunting. We have lots of mandatory, quote unquote, sessions in there and lots of office hours called up. But the reason that we are following this phased approach is that it aligns with CrowdStrike best practices for ramping up, but it also has proven to work as we have launched this service since we made it available last fall. This is the process that we have followed, and we've seen a lot of success with that. We recognize that there will be all different types of PSUs with different availability and resource in our various waves. So some will be ready to hit the ground running day 1 and want to be all the way at the end of phase 4, day 1, and we will give you as much information as possible to enable you to do the things that you need to do along the way. But for the people, the PSUs that are going to need a little bit additional support, we've built in time so that you can work with us closely and feel that you're getting the attention that's needed to get you to completion at the end of phase 4. Like Stephen said, just because we have these office hours doesn't mean that we go away in between during the wave. We absolutely are available to help, to provide that support. And there are additional MCNC resources that a lot of you have worked with in the past if we need to call them in. So we're confident that this is the approach that's going to help us, encourage and enable early and rapid adoption of this solution. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ruthy, guys, jump in real quick. Sorry about that. So far, excellent. Hey, everyone, this is David again. And as Stephen's doing onboarding, this is a fantastic process. I've partnered with MCNC for over the years on this. A key takeaway too is when they're onboarding, there's no reboot required. So there's no business interruption. So when these sensors are deployed, even in detect mode, we run in the kernel. We're the only one in the industry. We have a patent on it. So it's not like you have to take time out, say I have to reboot a server, I have to do change control. There's zero business interruption. And as you go through these phases, just know you're getting, CrowdStrike's, you look at the MITRE reports, the Gartner reports, the best in the business, security posture, and you have the best service team with MCNC. So not only is it the product you're getting, you get the service and the people behind it. I'm also there for your support also with MCNC. But I want to know that as you go through these phases, it's an excellent schedule. I've seen Stephen and his team. It's a wonderful process. Just know there's no reboot and there's no signatures. Everything we're looking at today is behavioral-based IOA patterns and machine learning. So as Stephen walks your team through this onboarding phase and the sensors installed in the kernel mode, there's no waiting for, like Stephen said, that I think said earlier, like the 500 meg file to be downloaded. It's instantly given situational awareness and a holistic approach to your environment. And as you go through these phases, you can see the telemetry that CrowdStrike's pulling in just from residing in there, about, like I said, about 1% CPU. So all these phases, zero business interruption, anything you need. Obviously, you got the greatest partner there with MCNC. So I just want to kind of fill it in for everyone, not to be like a little scared, like, oh, I have these phases that I have to reboot. That's nothing like that at all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think
Mhm.
that's great context. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
All right, so that concludes the slides that we have to overview with you today. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Everyone should have access to the Q&A box there in the Zoom window, so please feel free to add any questions that you may have. Our contact information is also on the slide, securityservices@mcnc.org. Myself, Ruthy Mabe, our Mabe, and then Stephen as well. Also listed there is our landing page that we have created for you again as we go through finish up this webinar today. We've compiled our list of frequently asked questions. We will be distributing those to everyone who's attended. We'll be posting them on the website, and that resource will continue to grow as we continue to create more content to support the upcoming onboarding waves. So it looks like we have a couple of questions. First question is, so no need for hardware or VM?
That is correct. There's no hardware on-prem. Everything is 100% cloud-based. There's a couple of URLs that need to be whitelisted, which should be fine. If not, we can always provide the fully qualified domain names or IP addresses for you. But yes, again, no hardware. You're up and running within seconds.
Great, thank you.
And
We had another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add on to the fact that this is a cloud solution, is that means regardless of where the agent's at, it's going to be able to pull policy, which is the MCNC managed portion where we're, setting policy standards that the agent pulls down. So that's one less thing that you have to worry about managing. Even the agent itself will automatically update. So that 50 megabyte agent, it's going to update a couple times a week, couple times a month. You're going to get, your upgrades to it as Crowdstrike rolls out new features. MCNC's vetting them, working with everybody to make sure they're solid and shaken out. So no end user disruption there. So it's very much going to be fire and forget from getting it onto devices.
Thank you, Stephen. We had another question about the sorting capabilities in the dashboards, specifically, I think, around the hygiene components, or maybe all of the above. Is it possible to sort out by operating or OU? Sorry about OU.
Yeah, so one of the good components about this, and when we go through onboarding, you'll see that there's a very uniform search bar across everything. The agent running on the device, it grabs whatever OU's been configured, whatever you've pushed to it. Even going down to operating system version, you can also tag devices either on install or within the GUI itself to manipulate them, split them into groups. If you're doing a migration, you could tag devices, old devices, tag devices, new devices, and do your reporting like that. Or again, dynamically through, OU, OS version, plenty of metrics like that to, give you the flexibility to see just the devices you want the way you want to. And as a fallback, you can generally export all of that data as a CSV or an XML format, sometimes even JSON, if you want to get particularly, scripty with it.
Stephen. All right, we have a question. Did this take the place of Microsoft's Defender and EDR? Before I let David and Stephen answer this question, you're not going to hear from the MCNC team, any of us knocking any of the competitors in the space. And we will say confidently that we are, are proud of the solution that we have. But Stephen, David, you guys want to talk about the comparison of the two?
Stephen, if you want to go first, or I can, it's up to you.
Yeah, so when we look at our onboarding phase, so Defender, two types. So there's the basic Windows Defender, and then you can start managing it with ATP, getting that extra visibility and more of a direct comparison to the offering Crowdstrike has. In either case, when we first install in onboarding, it's going to run basically in parallel. When we look at the training phase, when we change the policy to training, we tell Crowdstrike to check in with the Windows Security Center. And at that point, Windows Defender stands down and goes passive. So Crowdstrike is the solution monitoring from the EDR perspective, visibility perspective, etc. The final state baseline is very much the same. It's just training ramped up to the full, effectiveness, all of the toggles, dialed in right. So in that way, yes, the solution is designed for us to come in. If you have ATP or whichever solution like that, we'll come in, and that's honestly what we're offering. Defender is excellent product. Like Ruthy said, we're not going to badmouth anybody on. Then that's truthful. Defender is a solid solution. It's just this is our offering, our version of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great response for Stephen. Yeah, and from a product efficacy and simplicity of the management operational is where you'll see the Crowdstrike come into play. So just looking at those from there, and then like I said, behind the product, you have the people and services that you're talking to today. So that's a big thing. So like I said, once you're buying a security solution, you have the vendors behind it. But once again, putting the product out there, you'll see the Crowdstrike where it shines from detections, simplicity, operational, and holistic approach. You want to be able to go in every day and this, and say, hey, my security solution's working and I'm protected.
Thank you, guys. So next question, with the export you mentioned, would it export just what is selected, or would it try to export everything?
Yeah,
really depend.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Go on, David.
Yeah, it depends on kind of what you're looking for to export. We can customize certain columns and fields and tags that Stephen was talking about. So it's very customizable and flexible. So if you want to only export certain information or certain fields, we can do that for you also. And then obviously you can manipulate the data even once it's exported.
Thank you. So we have a question around the funding for this being provided by NCDPI for 2 years. So early on, we discussed that NCDPI has confirmed that this 2-year service has been funded the first year by the emergency relief funding that was made available, one-time funding, and the second year was funded by the school connectivity funding expansion. So, we are highly optimistic and hopeful that showing success in this service and early adoption success is going to, have lots of different metrics around that. But the earlier we can have PSUs enrolled in this service, it'll bolster our chances, I think, of potentially being able to secure funding after that initial 2 years. So let's see here. We have a question from a charter school, recognizing that MCNC provides a lot of support to the charter school and for a lot of their IT support. So the question specifically is around what additional hands-on support we can provide you for this rollout and service offering. Absolutely, if you have concerns around being able to walk through this onboarding process, reach out to us in advance. Let us know. We'll do what we can to provide additional resources to you from the MCNC team, or to enable you as a PSU to have the right information that you need before you join those waves. So like I said, we recognize that there's going to be PSUs from all different levels that'll be ready to either run full steam ahead, or we'll need to take some tentative steps to get through this onboarding process. And we want to be flexible to be able to support the community wherever you are on that spectrum. So let's see here. Next question. Does the service offering include the actual ability to keep servers, PCs patched with Windows updates in the product, or only make the recommendation for those patches? Stephen or David?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the vulnerability piece that Stephen was talking about, Falcon Spotlight, gives situational awareness into the Chrome, Adobe's, the Microsofts that are vulnerable. There is a limited amount, and I say limited, of Microsoft that we can patch from the vulnerability piece, but the majority would be that you would use maybe like an SCCM or another third-party product to patch. Once again, we're providing the awareness into the environment on information. We'll provide the KBs, all the information, the expert rating to help prioritize which systems should be patched and when. We can also correlate all that information to give you more of a baseline in your environment. But once again, it's more visibility and awareness to say these systems are missing these patches.
So there's a question, thank you, David. There's a question around if a PSU is under a contract with another vendor, if MCNC would buy out that existing contract, or if the school would be responsible for any early termination fee. So the answer is no, MCNC is not going to be purchasing or buying you out of any existing contracts that you have. Again, this service is available at no cost to you. So, the recommendation, if you are interested in getting enrolled in this service, as early as possible, the recommendation is come on, right? And join us. There's no additional cost to you, from your operations budget, what you've already spent for your existing service. So there's a couple of questions around licenses for student machines, and I am going to say here around that pricing, if you'll reach out to me or to the security services alias on the screen, we can have a conversation with you around what your interest is in that specific thing. So as we mentioned in an earlier slide, we want to make sure that you're aware that there's not a Chromebook agent from Crowdstrike, so that it should not be part of your licensing discussion. We can provide the fully managed solution all the way, including every component that have been reviewed today. We can also, trim that down, the service offering, to just the security components. So specifically around pricing, we want to talk scope with you first. And then we can really dig into some pricing there for student devices. Let's see. Did you hear early on that computer labs would be covered, that both students and staff use? Yes, that is correct. We are including in scope, when I said servers, staff devices, and other non-student PSU managed devices, when they so that's your one-to-one, you're giving the student that device. We're talking about your lab devices, those are included in scope with the service. Let's see. I don't know, David, if you have any insight on if Crowdstrike is interested in developing a Chromebook agent. You might want to talk to why it has not been prioritized yet to date.
Yeah, absolutely. It has not been prioritized today as far as the threat landscape goes. We're seeing it obviously across the Windows, Mac, and Linux environments. Crowdstrike is looking into it, but at this time, it's just not a major threat vector into those environments based upon the OS that's basically there, and it's just a browser based. But you're welcome to send me an email, and I'd be happy to jump online with you and Steven to discuss it more.
Thank you. We have another question. Is removing the current endpoint protection that's already been deployed mandatory? Is removing that mandatory?
Yeah. I would at first it's not. Obviously, as Steve and his team on board, it's highly recommended to put just the one AV CrowdStrike on there for simplicity and operational usage. But during the first phase, Steven and his team will walk you through the onboarding, which is putting us in detect mode. So we'll run in parallel or side by side with an existing AV. Once again, I use the word efficacy. You'll see the fields and files that are possibly getting by your current AV. And then as you move forward, just to bring back the CPU and resources to that machine by putting CrowdStrike on and removing possibly a legacy AV on there. So once again, phase one, it's not mandatory because you're in detect mode, but as Steve and his team walk you through, it's highly recommended just to remove that for, obviously you don't want conflicting AV products.
Thank you. Stephen, there's a question around, will the Mac version of the client only cover laptops only, or will it cover iPads as well? Stephen or David, either one?
Yeah, the solution's only going to cover your Mac OS, not your iOS running on iPads and iPhones. So Mac laptops, or if you've got any desktops or Mac minis or anything in the environment, anything running the Mac OS, Monterey, Catalina type will be supported.
All right, so are there any other questions? We have just a few more minutes here. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. We're at that very awkward final few minutes of a webinar where most people are ready to drop off and are just trying to hang around in case there's that one more juicy question that everyone was interested in asking. One thing I will highlight again, today's webinar is going to be recorded and shared out. We're also compiling from both webinars. We did have a session on Tuesday as well. We're combining all the questions that we received between both webinars and since then as well. And we will be providing that as a frequently asked questions list out to everyone and posting that on our resource page. Let's see here. So would you remind repeating the pricing again for the product you recommended back? So this service is being provided at no cost by NCDPI. So there is no there's no cost to the PSUs to enroll in this service. If you are interested in pricing for student devices, absolutely please reach out to the Security Services alias and we can work with you on a custom scope. There's a question around the 2-year window, if there's going to be another window open to apply. So we are going to be rolling our onboarding, starting at the end of next month, over the summer into the fall, and absolutely will continue to open subsequent onboarding waves depending on the volume of interest that we have. So if we get through the fall, we have the overwhelming majority of the PSUs that we've grouped together. We may focus on smaller waves, right, or more individual onboardings based on availability, right? And so it absolutely does not mean that you get past December of this year, you can't sign up for this service. It is available to PSUs up to today, up to April 30th of 2024. And again, we are hopeful that early adoption, wide adoption of this service will enable us to secure funding after that initial 24-month term. All right, so with that, we've got 1 minute left. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please be on the lookout for communication coming from me and the rest of the MCNC team. We look forward to working with you all on this service. I think it provides great value and we are really excited to kick this partnership off in this project. Stephen, David, anything else to add?
No, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity here to present with everyone. And like I said, it's been a wonderful partnering with MCNC. I'm looking forward to the future. If you have any questions, please reach out to Ruthy and Stephen on here. And great job for everyone here today.
Yeah, same thing. It's going to be pretty exciting to be able to get this out there and learn all the unknowns that exist out there and help make things a little bit more secure and a little bit harder on the bad guys.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.